Hello, and welcome to Macabre Histories. Before we delve into the shadows of the past, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell for notifications. You wouldn't want to miss the darkness we unearth. Now, settle in and let us travel back. The mud of the 1839 Ohio frontier was a relentless affliction. It clung to the hem of Ilara's wool skirt, seeped into the worn leather of her boots, and seemed to mirror the clinging misery of the world she was fleeing. Cincinnati had been a place of clamor, soot, and sickness. When her father, a good man broken by consumption, had finally stilled, Ilara was left with nothing but a worn Bible and a clipping from a gazette. The clipping spoke of a new settlement, Havenwood, nestled in the protective crook of the Scioto River Valley. It was founded by a man who had, the paper claimed, spoken directly to the Almighty, Prophet Jeremiah. Havenwood was not just a town, it was a promise of clean air, of shared burden, of a community built on purity and divine guidance, far from the grasping, industrialized rot of the cities. As the wagon Ilara had paid her last shilling to ride in crested the final ridge, the valley opened below her like a revelation. It was perfect, too perfect. Unlike the chaotic, muddy settlements clawing their way out of the wilderness, Havenwood was orderly. The houses, built of sturdy, pale timber, were arranged in concentric circles around a magnificent, eight-sided tabernacle whose spires seemed determined to prick the heavens. The fields were immaculate, the fences whitewashed. Smoke rose from chimneys in polite, disciplined gray columns. But it was the silence that struck her most. There was no shouting from a tavern, no discordant clang of a clumsy blacksmith, no wailing of the distressed. There was only the sound of industry, the distant rhythm of axes, the hum of the grain mill, and a low, resonant chanting that seemed to rise from the tabernacle itself. The wagon stopped at the perimeter, by a simple wooden arch bearing the carved words, "We are the chosen vessel." A man stepped out from a small gatehouse. He was not dressed in the rough linsey-woolsey of the frontier. He wore clean, undyed linen, his face clean-shaven, his eyes a peculiar shade of pale blue. He was one of the watchers, though Ilara did not know that term yet. "Name and purpose," he said. His voice was not unkind but flat, devoid of curiosity. "Ilara Bethpage. I read of your community. I seek refuge. I am a hard worker. I can spin, I can sew, and I can keep accounts." The watcher stared at her for a long moment, his gaze seeming to pass right through her thin cloak and into her very intentions. "We are all hard workers here, Sister Bethpage. Labor is prayer, but refuge is given only to those who accept the covenant. I have accepted the Lord," Ilara offered, clutching the worn Bible at her waist. "The Lord speaks through the prophet," the man corrected gently. "They are one and the same voice. You will surrender your worldly possessions at the gatehouse. They are burdens of the old world. You will be given the uniform of the community. You will be assigned a cot in the sisters' dormitory. You will attend evening vespers. Do you accept these terms?" Ilara looked back at the muddy track leading to the world that had taken everything from her. Then she looked forward, at the pristine, sun-drenched valley. "I accept." She stepped down from the wagon. Her small trunk, containing her father's Bible and her mother's silver locket, was taken from her. The watcher did not smile, but nodded. "Welcome to Havenwood. You are safe now. The prophet protects his flock." As she was led toward the dormitory, past rows of identical houses, she saw the other inhabitants. The women, dressed in the same plain linen, moved with a quiet, synchronized grace, their faces serene. The men, similarly clad, worked the fields, but they did not look at her. They looked forward, their eyes fixed on their tasks, or on the looming spire of the tabernacle. The communal hymn, which she now heard more clearly, was a mesmerizing minor key melody. The words were simple, repeated over and over. "The vessel is pure, the essence is bright. We wait for the coming of his holy light." That evening, in the vast echoing space of the octagonal tabernacle, Ilara saw him for the first time. Prophet Jeremiah was not what she expected. He was not an old, bearded ascetic. He was a man in his prime, perhaps 40, with a cascade of dark hair and a presence that seemed to generate its own heat. When he spoke, his voice filled the room, not with fire and brimstone, but with a resonant, soothing certainty. "You have come from the broken world," he said, his eyes scanning the hundreds of followers, seeming to land on each one individually. Ilara felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. "You have come carrying the sickness of false doctrine and the weariness of sin. But here, in Havenwood, we are cleansed. We are the new beginning. For I have seen the face of the Almighty, and He has declared this place and your bodies to be the start of a new, untainted creation." His sermon was not about hell. It was about purity. It was about separating the clean from the unclean. Ilara sat on the hard wooden bench, the unfamiliar linen shift scratching at her skin, and felt a profound, intoxicating wave of relief. She had been unclean. She had been lost. Now, she was found. She was part of the vessel. Life in Havenwood was dictated by bells. The morning bell at 4:30 for prayers, the bell for field work, the bell for the communal midday meal, the bell for vespers, the bell for the great silence at 9. It was a life of rigid, predictable order, and for the first few months, Ilara thrived on it. The trauma of her father's decline and the terror of her solitude faded, replaced by the rhythm of shared labor and the reassuring presence of the community. She was assigned to the spinning house, where her deft fingers quickly learned the rhythm of the wheel, turning flax and wool into thread for the community's plain garments. The work was arduous, her fingers often raw, but the steady thrum of the wheels and the low chanting of the other women provided a strange comfort. The women spoke little of the outside world. To speak of the before was discouraged. It was dwelling in the broken world, the prophet taught. Instead, they spoke of their tasks, of Scripture, Jeremiah's interpretation of it at least, and of the prophet himself. "His hands, did you see them at Vespers?" whispered Sister Agnes, a woman in her 30s whose face held a constant beatific smile. "They say he need only touch a barren field and it will yield corn. I heard he healed Brother Thomas's lung fever with a single prayer," added young Sister Mary, her eyes wide with devotion. Ilara listened, holding her own counsel. She respected the prophet. His sermons gave her a sense of purpose she had never known, but the adoration of the others felt feverish. It bordered on the kind of idolatry the Scriptures warned against, but she kept this thought locked tight. Doubts, she was learning, were not shared. Doubts were shadows, and shadows were to be brought to the light, meaning to the prophet or his watchers, for dissolution. Prophet Jeremiah was not a distant leader. He moved among them. He would appear at the smithy to inspect the new plowshares, his white linen strangely untouched by the soot. He would walk the rows of the spinning house, his gaze passing over the women. When his eyes fell on Ilara, she felt a prickle on her skin, a sensation that was equal parts alarming and validating. He saw her. One afternoon, as the late summer sun slanted through the high windows of the spinning house, he stopped directly behind her. The whirring of the wheels around her seemed to slow. She could smell him, not the sweat of labor, but the clean, sharp scent of carbolic soap and something else, something like dried lavender. "Sister Ilara," he said. His voice was a low vibration. Ilara stopped her wheel, her foot trembling on the treadle. "Prophet, your hands are quick. Your thread is fine." He did not look at her hands, but at her face. His eyes were dark, almost black and intensely focused. "You come from the city of pestilence, do you not?" "Yes, Prophet. From Cincinnati. A place of much sorrow, much dilution." He used that word often, dilution. He spoke of the world outside as a place where the sacred human form had been tainted by inferior strains, by weakness, by a thinning of the spiritual constitution. "My father, he passed from consumption," Ilara said quietly. Jeremiah nodded, a look of profound, almost theatrical pity on his handsome face. "The weakness of the flesh. It is the great tragedy of the broken world. The body is the temple, Sister Ilara, but the temples of the outside are crumbling. They are built of weak mortar and filled with corrupted air. Here we build anew. We build with stone." He reached out, not to touch her, but to touch the thread she had just spun, letting it run between his thumb and forefinger. "This is good thread, strong, pure. It will make a strong garment." He looked back at her, his gaze unwavering. "You are strong, Sister Alara. You have survived the broken world. You have been brought here for a reason." He then moved on, leaving Alara with a racing heart and the burning imprint of his attention. The other women looked at her, their expressions a mixture of awe and, in Sister Agnes's case, a flicker of something that might have been envy. That evening at the communal meal, a silent affair where hundreds ate porridge and black bread in the great hall, Alara felt the shift. She was no longer just another refugee. She had been seen. A watcher, Brother Silas, the same pale-eyed man from the gate, offered her a second portion of bread. She accepted, though her appetite had vanished. She began to notice the subtle hierarchies. The first circle, who sat nearest the prophet at meals and lived in the small cottages closest to the tabernacle. The watchers, who enforced the rules with silent, omnipresent scrutiny. And the consecrated, the children of Havenwood. There were not many of them, perhaps 24, ranging from toddlers to adolescents. They did not work in the fields or the houses. They were educated separately in a small schoolhouse behind the tabernacle. They wore finer linen, and they never ever played. They walked in silent, orderly lines, their faces pale and serious. When Alara had once smiled at a small girl of perhaps 5, the child had simply stared back, her eyes as flat and emotionless as the watcher at the gate. The children, Alara realized with a chill, were the most frightening thing in Havenwood. Autumn of 1839 deepened, painting the valley in hues of amber and rust. The harvest was bountiful, a fact Prophet Jeremiah attributed to the community's unified purity. The work was grueling, from dawn until the last light failed, but the storehouses were filled and a sense of security settled over the community. With the harvest home, the spiritual work intensified. Alara found a companion in Sister Hannah, an older woman with hands gnarled by rheumatism, but eyes that still held a spark of the before. Hannah had been a schoolteacher in Boston and had come to Havenwood with her husband 5 years prior. Her husband, she said, had found his peace by the river 2 winters ago, a common Havenwood euphemism for a departure. They spoke quietly while mending blankets in the long, cold evenings. Alara, trusting Hannah's age, dared to voice a sliver of her unease. "The children," Alara whispered, pulling her needle through the thick wool. "They do not seem joyful. Is it part of the doctrine?" Hannah paused her stitching, her eyes fixed on the flickering gaslight overhead. The tabernacle and the prophet's house were the only buildings blessed with the new gas illumination. The rest made do with tallow. "Joy is a worldly indulgence, Sister Alara. The prophet teaches that the consecrated are not children. They are vessels. They are being prepared for the great work. They are kept separate, kept pure, lest the residue of the broken world, our residue, tarnish them." "Tarnish them?" "We are all flawed," Hannah said, her voice dropping even lower, though no watcher was visible. "We who came from outside, we are the chaff, they are the wheat. We are here to serve them, to build the world they will inherit." This conversation chilled Alara more than the draft seeping under the dormitory door. She had come here seeking community, but she was finding a system of strange, cold stratification. She began to observe more closely, to listen past the soothing words of the prophet's sermons. She noticed the wall of compliance. In the back of the great dining hall, a massive slate board was hung. On it, in perfect chalk script, was the name of every member of the community. Beside each name were small marks, symbols. A simple star for exceptional piety or productivity, a circle for satisfactory compliance, and a black dash for a stumble. Stumbles were given for minor infractions: speaking during the great silence, a poorly mended garment, a moment of laughter deemed frivolous. Alara had 1 dash, given her first week for asking a watcher where the latrines were, rather than waiting to be instructed. But some names had more than 2 dashes. She saw the name Brother Levi, a man who worked in the fields, had 3 dashes. And then, one day, Brother Levi was gone. When Alara asked Sister Agnes where he had been reassigned, Agnes's beatific smile tightened. "Brother Levi was afflicted with a weakness of the spirit, Sister. He has been sent to the quiet room for reflection. We must pray his shadows are cleansed." The quiet room. It was a small, windowless building behind the smithy. No one went near it. There was always a watcher posted at its single door. Ilara had never seen anyone go in or come out. But Brother Levi was not at Vespers that night. He was not in the fields the next day. He was never seen again. The fear that Ilara had suppressed began to crystallize. This was not just order. It was control. Absolute control. The serenity of Havenwood was not born of peace. It was born of a terrible, suffocating pressure to conform. The penalty for non-compliance was not rebuke. It was erasure. She also learned of the redemption. If one amassed too many dashes or committed a grave stumble, like questioning the prophet's word, they could be redeemed. This involved a public confession at Vespers, where the individual would kneel before the entire community, detail their shadow thoughts, and beg the prophet for purification. The prophet would then place his hands upon their head and, in a loud voice, draw the shadow from them. The penitent often wept, convulsed, or fainted. Afterward, they would be serene again, their eyes holding that same placid, empty glow as the others. Their dashes would be wiped clean. Ilara vowed she would never kneel on that floor. She would be perfect. She would be silent. She would spin her thread, eat her porridge, and sing the hymns. She would make her face a mask of compliance. But the prophet's gaze lingered on her. During his sermons, she felt it burning into her. Even when she kept her head bowed, he was watching her. He had called her strong, and she was beginning to understand that in Havenwood, strong did not mean resilient. It meant useful. One cold November night, the bell tolled for an emergency vesper. This was unheard of. The community filed into the tabernacle, their faces etched with confusion and anxiety. The gaslights were burning high, casting a harsh white glare. Prophet Jeremiah stood on the dais, but he was not the soothing shepherd of their evenings. His face was thunderous, his hands clenched. "A shadow has fallen upon us," he boomed, and the sound echoed off the 8 walls. "A weakness of the spirit has manifested in our midst. Sister Ruth has succumbed to the whispers of the broken world." Ilara scanned the crowd. Sister Ruth, a quiet woman from the kitchens, was missing. She was found by the river, the prophet declared, his voice thick with disgust. She sought to flee this paradise, to return to the filth and dilution of the outside. She has rejected the covenant. She has rejected the light. He paused, letting the collective gasp dissipate. She has been removed. Her name is stricken from the wall. She is no longer of the vessel. Let this be a lesson. You are here because I have saved you. You are here because I have seen your potential for purity. But the vessel must be perfect. There is no room for cracks. There is no room for doubt. And there is no escape. Ilara's blood ran cold. The promise of Havenwood, the refuge from the world, had just transformed. The gates were not there to keep the broken world out. They were there to keep the flock in. Winter arrived with a vengeance. The valley was draped in a suffocating blanket of white, isolating Havenwood completely from the outside world. The work moved indoors, mending tools, grinding flour, and the endless spinning. The cold was bitter, but the tabernacle was kept warm, the center of their universe. It was in this insulated, snow-blinded world that Prophet Jeremiah prepared his flock for his greatest revelation. For weeks, the sermons had become more intense, more focused. He spoke less of scripture and more of essence, lineage, and the divine mandate. He preached that the world's failings were due to a pollution of the spirit, which manifested as a physical pollution of the form. The Almighty sought to create man in his own image, Jeremiah preached, his voice mesmerizing in the heated air of the tabernacle. But man, in his weakness, mingled with lesser strains. He diluted the divine spark. The world is populated by faded copies, by weakened temples. This, he motioned to the snow-covered windows, is the winter of mankind. But here, we are the spring. The community was rapt. They leaned forward, desperate for the warmth of his certainty. The Lord has spoken to me in the great silence of the snows. Jeremiah continued, his eyes seeming to burn. He has revealed the path to our ascension. It is not enough to simply live in purity. We must create purity. We must forge a new generation, a generation born not of worldly attachment or frivolous romance, but of divine selection. A generation born from a pure source. A nervous ripple passed through the congregation. They did not understand, but they knew a new law was coming. The Lord has tasked me with a terrible and wonderful burden, the prophet said, lowering his voice to an intimate, trembling whisper. He has kept one lineage pure, one line untainted, stretching back to the very first man. A lineage preserved through time, waiting for this moment, for this flock. He paused, letting the silence stretch, heavy and thick. He has revealed that this sacred essence, this divine and untainted inheritance, flows within me. The gasp was collective. Elara felt her stomach clench. Sister Agnes beside her was weeping with joy, her hands clasped to her chest. My essence is the key, Jeremiah declared, his voice rising again. It is the seed of the new world. It is the future of the true faith. We have been brought together here in this holy valley for one purpose, the great work, to reestablish the sacred line, to create the perfect vessel. He then laid out the doctrine. It was called the Sacred Compact. Marriage, as the broken world knew it, was abolished. It was a worldly contract based on fleeting passion and material gain. Henceforth, all pairings within Havenwood would be dictated by the prophet himself. He, and he alone, would see the spiritual compatibility and decree the bindings. But this was only the first part. The second part was the true horror. To ensure the purity of the new generation, the sacred essence must be passed on. All bindings were holy, but the first generation of the new world, the children born from this day forward, must be consecrated by the purest source. It is my burden, he said, his face a mask of solemn sacrifice, to be the father of the new world. All children of the compact will be of my line. My essence, joined with the chosen vessels of this flock, will create the generation that will inherit the earth. Elara felt the blood drain from her face. She felt dizzy, the room tilting. He was not speaking in metaphor. He was claiming a divine right to father every child in the community. He was forcing them, by divine decree, to breed only within the church, and only with him as the source. She looked at the faces around her. Some were stunned into silence, their eyes wide with disbelief. But many, like Sister Agnes, were ecstatic. They saw it as the ultimate honor, a way to be literally joined with their prophet, to carry the sacred line. The men, Elara noted, were the most stunned. Their role in propagation was, it seemed, rendered obsolete, reduced to that of guardians and protectors of the consecrated children, but not their progenitors. "This is the word of the Almighty," Jeremiah thundered, as if sensing the hesitation. "To question it is to question God. To refuse it is to declare yourself corrupted, a vessel unfit for the light. And the corrupted," he added, his voice dropping to a deadly calm, "cannot be allowed to taint the pure." The threat was clear. It was the wall of compliance. It was the quiet room. It was the fate of Brother Levi and Sister Ruth: accept or be erased. Elara bowed her head, her hair falling forward to hide the terror and revulsion on her face. She felt trapped. The snow outside was a prison wall, and the man on the dais had just declared ownership of her very body. The revelation of the sacred essence changed Havenwood overnight. The air, once serene, was now electric with a strange, feverish energy. The women were divided. Many, like Sister Agnes, seemed to walk on air, preening and praying with a new fervor, desperate to be chosen as a vessel. They cast sidelong glances at one another, a new sharp-edged competition entering their ranks. Others, like Elara and the older Hannah, moved with a new, hollow-eyed quiet. They kept their heads down, their work becoming a desperate, mechanical escape. The men were subdued, their faces grim. They worked the frozen woodlots with a silent, contained fury. They were still believers, but their status had been irrevocably altered. They were drones in a hive now ruled by the prophet's divine mandate. Prophet Jeremiah wasted no time. 3 days after the revelation, the first binding ceremony was announced. The tabernacle was decorated not for a wedding, but for a sacrifice. The gas lights were dimmed and heavy incense, thick with myrrh and sandalwood, choked the air. The community was assembled. "The Lord has shown me the first pairing," Prophet Jeremiah announced from the dais. "A pairing not of flesh, but of spiritual necessity. Brother Joseph," he called out. Brother Joseph, a young, broad-shouldered man who worked the forge, stepped forward. His face was pale, his hands clenched at his sides. And Sister Mary, young Sister Mary, the girl who had spoken of the prophet's healing powers, walked forward, her entire body trembling with what looked like ecstatic joy. She was barely 18. "These two," the prophet declared, "shall be bound as guardians. They will share a cottage, they will share labor, they will protect the vessel." He then looked only at Mary. "And Sister Mary, you have been found worthy. You shall be the first. You shall carry the sacred essence." Brother Joseph looked at the floor, his jaw working. He was to be her guardian, her husband in name, but he would never be the father of her children. He was a protector, a chaperone for the prophet's claim. The binding itself was a short, chilling ritual. Mary and Joseph knelt. They did not face each other. They faced the prophet. They recited an oath, not of love or fidelity to each other, but of loyalty to the compact. "My life for the vessel," Joseph recited, his voice cracking. "My body for the vessel," Mary whispered, her eyes fixed on Jeremiah's face. Then the prophet turned to the rest of the congregation. "The time has come for the selection of the next vessels. The Spirit moves among me, seeking the strong, the pure, the unwavering." He walked down from the dais, moving slowly through the central aisle. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sharp intake of breaths. The smell of incense was overpowering. He walked, his dark eyes scanning the rows of women. He passed Sister Agnes, whose hand was outstretched as if begging for alms. He passed Hannah, whose head was bowed so low her chin touched her chest. He stopped in front of Alara. She had been trying to make herself small, to disappear into the plain wool of the woman next to her. But there was no hiding. The heat from his body seemed to reach her, even from a few feet away. She was forced to look up. His face was serene, his expression one of profound, paternalistic kindness. But his eyes were possessive. They were the eyes of a collector examining a prized specimen. "Sister Alara Bethpage," he said, his voice resonating through the silent hall. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might break. "You are strong." He repeated the words he had spoken in the spinning house. "You have survived the broken world. Your temple is sound. The Spirit is pleased with you." He raised his hand and pointed a single, irrefutable finger at her. "You shall be the second. You shall be bound, and you shall carry the sacred essence." A collective sigh went through the room. Sister Agnes let out a small, sharp sound of disappointment. Alara felt the world go gray at the edges. This was not a proposal. It was not a choice. It was a sentence. "And her guardian," the prophet continued, turning his gaze, "shall be Brother Silas." Ilara's breath hitched. Brother Silas, the pale-eyed, merciless watcher from the gate, the enforcer, the man who had likely escorted Brother Levi to the quiet room. It was a perfectly cruel calculation. She was not just being bound, she was being imprisoned. She would be given to the man who embodied the cold, unwavering law of Havenwood. He would not be a husband, he would be her jailer, ensuring she complied with the prophet's divine mandate. "The binding will take place in 3 days, the prophet declared, returning to the dais. "Let us sing praise for the expansion of the vessel." The organ began, and the voices rose, shaky at first, then swelling to the rafters. "The vessel is pure, the essence is bright. We wait for the coming of his holy light." Ilara stood frozen, her limbs turned to ice. She could not sing. She could not breathe. She was trapped. She was going to be bound to the watcher and forced to bear the prophet's child. The promise of Havenwood had become her personal nightmare. The 3 days before Ilara's binding were a blur of suffocating ritual. She was removed from the communal dormitory and placed in a small purification cell at the back of the tabernacle. It was a simple room, clean and white, with only a cot and a basin. She was attended to by 2 first-circle women, their faces set in masks of holy reverence. They bathed her, dressed her in fine new linen, and fed her only water and thin broth. They spoke to her in hushed, congratulatory tones. "You are so blessed, sister, to be chosen so soon. The prophet's favor is upon you." Ilara said nothing. She had entered a state of cold, quiet shock. She felt disconnected from her own body, as if she were watching this happen to someone else. This, she realized, was what they wanted. They were not just purifying her body. They were emptying it, making it a vessel in the truest sense. A hollow container waiting to be filled by the prophet's will. Her mind, however, was racing. She thought of Sister Ruth, removed for trying to flee. She thought of Brother Levi, vanished into the quiet room. There was no escape. The snow was waist-deep outside. The forest was dense. And even if she made it past the perimeter watchers, where would she go? She had no money, no family. The broken world, which she had fled, was as terrifying as Havenwood. But the alternative. On the second night, Sister Hannah was permitted to visit her. The older woman entered, her face a web of deep-set worry. She dismissed the attendants. "Child," Hannah whispered, her gnarled hand gripping Ilara's arm with surprising strength. "You must not fight this. Not openly. How can any of us?" Ilara's voice was hoarse. "It is an abomination, Hannah. It is not faith. It is power." Hannah cut her off, her eyes darting to the door. "It is his will. He has trapped us here. He has convinced the weak, and he controls the strong. You are strong, Ilara, which is why he has chosen you, and it is why he has paired you with Silas, the Watcher. He is the prophet's right hand. He sees everything. He will report every word, every hesitation. You must comply. You must appear to comply." "I cannot," Ilara whispered, the first hot tears of defiance burning her eyes. "I cannot do this." "Listen to me," Hannah insisted, her face close. "You must survive." A stumble now, a moment of defiance at the ceremony, and you will be taken to the quiet room. And no one returns from there the same, if they return at all. Do you understand? Your body is not your own, not anymore, but your mind is. Keep your mind, Ilara. Bow your head, say the words, and survive. Winter does not last forever. Hannah's words, intended to comfort, only deepened the horror. She was being told to submit to the unthinkable, to preserve a mind that would be forever scarred by the act. The day of the binding arrived. The tabernacle was filled again. The incense was heavier this time, so thick it made her eyes water. Ilara was led to the dais, her feet unsteady. She saw Brother Silas standing there, his pale eyes fixed on the prophet. He looked at Ilara not as a bride, but as a new post he was assigned to guard. Prophet Jeremiah's voice washed over her, a torrent of words about purity, essence, and the glory of the new generation. Ilara felt her spirit detach, floating somewhere up in the octagonal rafters, looking down at the small, pale woman in white linen. She knelt. Silas knelt beside her, his proximity a cold presence. "Brother Silas," the prophet intoned, "you are charged as guardian of this vessel. You will watch over her. You will ensure her purity of thought and action. You will deliver her for the consecration when she is called. Your life for the vessel. My life for the vessel." Silas repeated, his voice as flat and empty as the winter sky. "Sister Ilara," the prophet said, turning his full attention to her. He stepped closer. He was so close she could see the small pulse in his throat. "You are chosen. You will be the mother of the new world. Your body is the temple. My essence is the offering. Your body for the vessel." Ilara's throat closed. The faces of the community blurred before her. She saw Hannah, her expression anguished. She saw Sister Agnes, her face tight with jealousy. She felt Silas's cold presence. She felt the prophet's burning gaze. "Bow your head, say the words, and survive." Her voice was a dry scrape. "My body for the vessel." A great amen rose from the congregation. The prophet placed his hands on her head. His touch was not gentle, it was firm, possessive. He held her there for a long moment. Ilara squeezed her eyes shut, fighting the wave of nausea. "It is done," he declared. She was moved to a new cottage, small and clean on the first circle, near the prophet's own house. Silas moved her few belongings, the communal linen, a comb, a prayer book, into the small room. The cottage had 2 rooms, a main room with a hearth, and a small bedroom with a single cot. "That is your room," Silas said, pointing. "I will sleep by the hearth. You will not leave this cottage after the evening bell without my escort. You will attend vespers with me. You will work in the spinning house with me. I will be your shadow, Sister Ilara, until the consecration is complete." She was a prisoner, a broodmare, assigned a keeper. That night, Ilara lay on the cot, the unfamiliar silence of a private room pressing in on her. She listened to the sound of Silas's breathing in the next room, a steady, mechanical rhythm. She did not weep. The cold shock had given way to a deep, slow-burning coal of fury. Hannah was wrong. She could not just survive. She could not let this happen. She did not know how, but she would find a way to defy the prophet. She would find a way to break the sacred compact. The first week of her binding was a lesson in psychological torment. Brother Silas was, as promised, her shadow. He did not speak to her unless it was to issue an order or correct a behavior. "Your pace is too slow, sister. It suggests a reluctant spirit. You did not sing the final hymn at Vespers. Your voice must be heard in praise. You looked at Sister Hannah for too long. Your focus should be on the prophet's words." He was not cruel in his tone. He was precise. He was a physician diagnosing symptoms of non-compliance. Ilara felt herself suffocating, her every breath monitored. At the spinning house, he did not work, but stood near her wheel, his pale eyes scanning her, the other women, and the room. The women, in turn, avoided Ilara. She was no longer one of them. She was the prophet's property, and she was guarded by the chief watcher. To associate with her was to invite Silas's scrutiny upon themselves. Even Hannah only offered her brief, strained nods in passing. The isolation was complete. Ilara's cottage, meant to be an honor, was a cage. At night she would lie awake, listening to the winter wind howl outside, and the even unnerving breathing of the man in the next room. He never seemed to sleep deeply. If she rose to get a drink of water, she would hear the rustle of his blanket as he sat up, watching her in the darkness. The consecration had not yet happened. The prophet taught that the vessel must be spiritually aligned for a full lunar cycle after the binding. Ilara had 3 weeks. 3 weeks to find a way out or a way to resist. But how? The walls were thick. The watchers patrolled the perimeter, and Silas was inescapable. She focused on compliance. She became the perfect vessel. She sang the hymns loudly, her voice clear and strong. She kept her eyes fixed on the prophet during his sermons, her face a mask of adoration. She worked her spinning wheel with a furious, fast-paced rhythm. She spoke to Silas only to ask questions of doctrine. "Brother Silas," she asked one evening as they sat by the hearth, he oiling a leather strap, she mending one of his linen shifts. "How did the prophet know his essence was the pure one?" Silas paused, his hands stilling. He looked at her, his pale eyes narrowed, searching for the shadow of doubt in her question. Ilara kept her expression open, innocent, and curious. "It is a great wonder. How does one receive such knowledge? Was it a vision? Did an angel speak to him?" He seemed to accept her performance of piety. "The prophet does not receive knowledge, sister. He is the knowledge. The Lord speaks through him as the river flows from the spring. He has always known. He built Havenwood to protect that knowledge until the time was right, until the flock was gathered. And you," she pressed gently, "you have always known this? I was the first one he found 20 years ago." Silas said, his voice taking on a rare, faint note of warmth. "I was a godless man in a Baltimore gutter, broken by drink and sin. He found me. He saw what I could be. He made me what I am. He is the architect of my soul. Whatever he asks, it is right. Because he asks it." Ilara's stomach tightened. This was not a man who could be reasoned with. He was not a mere enforcer. He was the first and most fervent of the disciples. His faith was absolute, his loyalty forged in his own salvation. He would not, could not, ever see the prophet as wrong. Her performance of compliance would have to be perfect. She began to use her piety as a tool. "Brother Silas," she said a few days later, I am anxious about the consecration. I wish to be worthy. I feel I must purify myself further. May I be permitted to fast?" Silas considered this. A desire for extra purification was a sign of devotion. A 2-day fast, it is acceptable. And may I be permitted to study the prophet's writings, the book of the vessel. I wish to have the words imprinted on my soul. This too was approved. Ilara was given access to the small collection of pamphlets and books written and printed by the prophet himself on Havenwood's own printing press. For the next 2 weeks, Ilara ate little, shrinking in her linen garments. She spent her evenings not in conversation, but poring over the prophet's dense, repetitive, and narcissistic prose. Silas watched her, and for the first time she saw a flicker of approval in his pale eyes. He believed her. He believed she was becoming the perfect willing vessel. But Ilara was not just reading. She was studying. She was learning the prophet's mind, his arguments, his justifications. And she was searching for something else. A weakness, a contradiction, a flaw in the whitewashed walls of his doctrine. She also used her fasting weakness to her advantage. One afternoon at the spinning house, she swayed on her feet, her hand going to her head. "Brother Silas, the air, I am faint." Silas, for all his coldness, was responsible for her physical well-being. A damaged vessel was of no use. "You will return to the cottage." "No," she said weakly. "I must finish my quota. Labor is prayer. Perhaps just some air. The infirmary. Sister Hannah works there. She has salts." Silas was reluctant to let her out of his sight, but a public fainting would be a disruption. He escorted her, his hand gripping her elbow, across the snowy commons to the infirmary, a small building next to the kitchens. Sister Hannah was inside, grinding herbs. When she saw Ilara, pale and supported by Silas, her face went rigid with fear. "She is faint from her fast," Silas stated. "Give her the salts. I will wait outside." The moment the door closed, Hannah rushed to her. "Ilara, child, what are you doing? You look like a ghost." "I am fine," Ilara said, her voice urgent and low. "Hannah, I have no time. I am being watched. I need your help." "Help? What can I do?" "He is always with you. I need to know about the quiet room." "What happens there?" Hannah blanched, backing away. "We don't speak of it. We don't." "Hannah, please." Ilara grasped her hand. "He has me in a cage. He will... The consecration. It is in 1 week. What happens to those who are taken?" Hannah was shaking. They are cleansed. The prophet and Silas, they go in. There are treatments, cold water, fasting, and the voice of submission. They are made to listen to the prophet's recorded voice over and over from a talking machine he brought from the city. For days, in the dark, when they come out, if they come out, they are simple. They are compliant. Their shadows are gone, Ilara, but so is their light. Ilara's blood ran cold. A talking machine, a phonograph, she had heard them called. Psychological torment. "And Sister Ruth?" Ilara whispered. "The one who fled." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "She did not succumb by the river, Ilara. She was found by the river, by Silas. He brought her back. She was taken to the quiet room, but she was too strong, too defiant. She would not break. After 3 days," Hannah choked on a sob. "The quiet room was empty. Silas said she had been released to the Lord, her spirit too corrupted to be saved." Ilara finally understood. There was no removal. There was no banishment. There was only compliance, or the void. "Hannah," Ilara said, her voice now as cold and hard as the ice outside. "I need one more thing. I need a way out. Not of Havenwood. I need a way out of the consecration. There is no way. In your herbs, is there anything that would make one ill? Ill enough to be an unfit vessel? Something to delay?" Hannah stared at her, horrified. "You mean a poison?" "No," Ilara said. Not to end, but to spoil to make the temple impure, as he would say. To buy me time, Hannah looked at the door where Silas's shadow loomed. She turned back to Alara, her mind made up. She quickly moved to a dark corner, opened a small tin, and poured a tiny amount of a dark powdered root into a scrap of linen. "This is foxglove," she whispered, pressing it into Alara's palm. "A tiny, tiny pinch, less than a grain of wheat, in your water. It will vex your heart. It will make you weak, faint. It will seem a sickness of the spirit. But Alara," she grasped her hand, "too much, even a little too much, and your heart will stop. It is a terrible risk." "It is a better risk than the alternative," Alara said, hiding the packet in her fist. She splashed water on her face, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Brother Silas was waiting, his arms crossed, his face impassive. "I am better now, brother. Thank you for your patience." As they walked back to the cottage, Alara clutching the powdered root, she felt the first fragile spark of agency. He wanted her body. She would make her body a weapon. Alara had 1 week. The date of the consecration was set for the night of the new moon. She began her desperate, dangerous gambit. That night, after Silas had settled by the hearth, Alara, in the privacy of her small room, unwrapped the packet of foxglove. The powder was dark purple, almost black, less than a grain of wheat. Her hands trembled as she took a minuscule pinch and stirred it into her cup of water. She drank it. It tasted of dirt and bitterness. She lay down on her cot, her heart hammering with fear, and waited. An hour passed, nothing. Then, a strange fluttering began in her chest, like a trapped bird. A wave of nausea rose in her throat, and the room seemed to tilt slightly. She was weak, a cold sweat breaking out on her forehead. It was working. The next morning, when she tried to stand for the morning bell, she collapsed back onto the cot. Silas was at her door in an instant. "Sister Alara, the bell. It is time for prayer." I cannot," she whispered, her voice genuinely weak. "I am unwell. My heart, it is rapid." He entered, his suspicion warring with his duty. He placed a hand on her forehead. She was clammy. He felt her pulse at her wrist. His eyes widened slightly. "Your heart, it flutters." "It is the anxiety," Alara breathed, playing her role. I am afraid I am not pure enough. The consecration. Perhaps the Lord is finding me unworthy." This, Silas understood, a spiritual failing. "You will remain here. I will inform the prophet. I will fetch Sister Hannah." Hannah arrived, her face a mask of professional concern. She examined Alara, her fingers probing, her eyes meeting Alara's for a fraction of a second. "It is a profound weakness, Brother Silas. Her pulse is irregular. A spirit fever, perhaps, brought on by her pious fasting and her anxiety for the great work. Prophet Jeremiah himself came that afternoon. He swept into the small room, filling it with his presence and the scent of lavender. He frowned at Alara, pale and trembling on the cot. "What is this, sister?" he boomed. "A weakness, when you are so close to your purpose?" "Prophet," Alara whispered, tears of genuine fear and sickness welling. I feel a shadow in me. My heart, it will not be still. I fear I will taint the sacred essence with my failing." Jeremiah stared at her. This was a complication. He could not, in front of Silas, his most fervent follower, perform the consecration on a vessel that was unfit or spiritually tainted. It would call his own divine perception into question. "You are not failing," he said, his voice lowering to a mesmeric hum. "You are being tested. Your devotion is so strong that your body cannot contain the light. You will rest. You will pray." He turned to Silas. "The consecration is delayed. She is to be fortified. Sister Hannah will attend her. But you," he said to Silas, "will not leave this cottage. Her weakness may be a temptation for the shadows. Your vigilance must be absolute." Alara had won. A delay, but it was a temporary victory and a costly one. For the next 3 days, she lived in a hazy, frightening twilight. She continued to take minuscule, terrifying doses of the foxglove. Her heart hammered, then slowed, then hammered again. She had no appetite. She was truly, terribly sick. Hannah tended to her, bringing her broths, which Alara barely touched, and tonics, which were just water. "You are fading, child," Hannah whispered one night, her face gray with worry as she wiped Alara's brow. "This is no solution. You are harming yourself. You cannot keep this up. He will wait." It's buying me time," Alara rasped. "Time to think." But her mind was fogged by the poison. She couldn't think. She could only endure. On the fourth day, Silas, who had been sitting by the hearth like a stone sentinel, spoke. "The prophet is displeased," he said, not looking at her. "He says your sickness is a lack of faith. He says the body is subject to the will." Alara's fog of sickness was pierced by a new, sharp fear. The prophet was growing impatient. This sickness was reflecting badly on him. That afternoon, a new arrival appeared at the cottage, a man Alara had never seen before. He was not dressed in Havenwood linen. He wore the dark, rumpled suit of the city. He carried a black leather bag. "This is Dr. Finch," the prophet said, sweeping in behind him. "He attends to some of our associates in Cincinnati. I have summoned him to confirm the health of my flock. He will examine you." A doctor, a real doctor from the outside. Ilara's heart seized, this time with pure panic. A doctor would not see a spirit fever. He would see a poisoning. Dr. Finch was a small, weary-looking man with spectacles. He shooed Silas and the prophet from the room. "I must examine the patient alone." He sat by her bed, looked at her pupils, and placed a cold metal disc, a new invention, a stethoscope, on her chest, listening intently. Alara held her breath. He listened for a long time, his brow furrowed. Finally, he leaned back. "Sister Alara," he said in a low, academic voice, "your heart is behaving erratically, a profound arrhythmia." He looked at her eyes, then at her hands. "Tell me, have you been gardening?" Alara's blood ran cold. "Whoa, what? Or perhaps taking a tonic for the heart?" He tapped his bag. "I see this often. Digitalis, foxglove. Ladies in the city take it for palpitations. They often take too much." He knew. He knew instantly. Alara's charade was over. She stared at him, her eyes wide with terror. She said nothing. Dr. Finch sighed. He looked at the door, then back at Alara. "Young woman," he whispered, "I am not one of them. I am a man of science. The prophet and I, we have an arrangement. I supply him with certain laudanums and tonics for his divine visions. He pays me in gold. I keep his secrets. He keeps mine. I am here to make a report, not to save you." Alara felt a crushing despair. "Then you will tell him." "I will tell him," the doctor said, packing his bag, "that you are suffering from a severe cardiac distress brought on by a combination of malnutrition and profound nervous anxiety. I will tell him that the stress of the consecration could prove terminal." He looked at her pointedly. "That your heart could fail." Alara stared at him. "Why? Why would you?" "Because," the doctor said, his weary face tightening, "I am a physician. I took an oath. And what I see in this valley, this is not medicine. It is madness. I cannot stop it, but I do not have to participate in it." He stood. "I will tell him you are, at present, medically unfit. That is all the time I can buy you. I advise you," he added, his hand on the doorknob, "to stop taking the foxglove, or you will not need to worry about the prophet." He opened the door and spoke to Jeremiah and Silas. "The patient is in a delicate state, grave cardiac arrhythmia. I cannot, as a physician, recommend any undue stress. It could be catastrophic." The prophet's face was a mask of thunder. He had been thwarted. He looked at Alara, and for the first time his gaze was not of a benevolent father. It was cold. It was the look of a man whose prized possession had been found to be flawed. He turned and stormed out of the cottage, Silas following him like a shadow. Elara was alone. She had won again, but she had also failed. She was unfit. She had bought her own safety, but she was damaged goods, and she knew with chilling certainty what the prophet did with things that were flawed. He removed them. She had not escaped the quiet room. She had only taken a different, slower path to it. Elara's sickness made her an outcast. She was officially declared tainted by the prophet, not with sin, but with a physical weakness that made her unfit to carry the sacred essence. The consecration was canceled. Her binding to Silas was, in effect, nullified. She was moved from the cottage back to the sisters' dormitory. Silas no longer guarded her. He no longer even looked at her. Her purpose in the hierarchy was gone. She was now less than the lowest field hand. She was a failure, a cracked vessel. The other women, who had once envied her, now pitied or shunned her. She was a living example of the prophet's disfavor. Sister Agnes, who had been jealous, was now chosen, along with 2 other young women, for the next round of bindings. The feverish, competitive energy returned to the spinning house, and Elara was left in a cold bubble of isolation. She was put to work in the kitchens, the most grueling, thankless job in Havenwood, scouring pots, peeling potatoes in the freezing cellar, hauling buckets of ash. It was back-breaking labor, meant to be punishing, but Elara welcomed it. It meant she was out of the cottage. It meant she was no longer under Silas's constant, suffocating watch. She was invisible, and in Havenwood, invisibility was a form of freedom. She slowly, carefully, recovered from the effects of the foxglove. The fluttering in her chest subsided and her strength returned, forged anew by the heavy work. She kept her head down and her eyes open. Being in the kitchen, she saw the first circle women come and go. They came to retrieve the special finer foods prepared for the prophet, white bread, preserved meats, and wine, while the rest of the community ate porridge and black bread. She saw the comings and goings of the prophet's house, and she saw the children, the consecrated. Sister Mary, the first girl who had been bound and consecrated, was now heavily with child. She and 2 other women from a year prior were housed in a separate building, the nursery. Elara had never been inside. It was guarded, just as the quiet room was. One night, Elara was tasked with taking the evening meal scraps to the pigsty, which was located behind the main houses, near the nursery. It was late, and a heavy fog rolled in from the river, muffling all sound. As she passed the nursery, she heard a sound that was utterly foreign in Havenwood, the sharp, thin wail of a newborn. Sister Mary. The child was born, the first child of the sacred compact. A strange, protective instinct flared in Elara, a child born into this system. She lingered in the shadows, her task forgotten. An hour later, 2 figures emerged from the nursery. One was a first circle midwife. The other was Prophet Jeremiah. He was carrying a bundle, the newborn. Elara shrank back into the fog. The prophet did not walk toward his own house. He walked away from the center of the community, toward the small, isolated schoolhouse where the other consecrated children lived. But he didn't stop at the schoolhouse. He continued past it, toward the dark line of the pine forest that bordered the valley. Curiosity, stronger than her fear, propelled Elara. She followed at a distance, using the fog and the trees as cover. She followed him for nearly half a mile, to a place she had never been. It was a clearing. In it stood a single, squat stone building. It looked like a spring house, built over a creek, but it was larger, and it had a sturdy locked door. A watcher stood outside it. The prophet approached. The watcher unlocked the door. Jeremiah went inside, still holding the bundle. He was inside for perhaps 5 minutes. When he came out, his arms were empty. The watcher locked the door. The prophet walked back to his house, his step quick and light. Elara waited, her heart frozen, for another hour. The watcher remained, a statue in the fog. Finally, a second watcher arrived to relieve him. Elara slipped away, her mind reeling. What was that building? Why was a newborn taken there in the dead of night, separated from its mother? The next day, she saw Sister Mary. The young woman was back in the dining hall, sitting with her guardian, Brother Joseph. She was pale, hollow-eyed, but she was smiling, that same beatific empty smile as the others. "Praise be," Sister Agnes said at the spinning wheel. Ilara had been moved back, her penance in the kitchen apparently over. "Sister Mary has delivered a perfect son," the prophet said. "He has been taken to the consecrated house to begin his divine education." Ilara looked at Mary across the hall. The girl was eating porridge, her movements robotic. Her gaze was distant. She did not look like a new mother. She looked cleansed, like the people who came out of the quiet room. Ilara realized the truth. The mothers were not allowed to keep their children. The moment they were born, they were taken, consecrated, handed over to the prophet to be raised in that cold stone building, guarded and taught. What? But why the stone building so far from the others? Why the secrecy? She had to know. She had to see inside. Her opportunity came with the arrival of a newcomer. A man. This was rare. Most refugees were women or families. He was a blacksmith, hired from Cincinnati as Havenwood's own smith had grown too old and infirm. His name was Thomas. Thomas was different. He was loud. He was pragmatic. And he was not a believer. He was a hired hand, here for the high wages the prophet offered for his skill, paid in gold. He was allowed to live in the smithy, outside the communal dorms. He was an outsider, tolerated for his skill, and Ilara, now an outcast, saw in him her first and only potential ally. Thomas was a stark contrast to the pale, linen-clad men of Havenwood. He was broad, his arms corded with muscle from his trade, and his face, perpetually smudged with soot, was open and expressive. He whistled while he worked, a shocking sound in the pious silence of the community. The watchers observed him constantly, but his contract and his vital skill gave him a small sphere of protection. Ilara was tasked with bringing the smithy new tools to be mended: hoes, scythes, and plow blades. She found excuses to go often, hauling heavy iron in a wheelbarrow. At first, Thomas barely spoke to her. He was busy, and she was just another one of the prophet's silent, gray-clad women. But Ilara was persistent. "That's a fine hammer work," she said one afternoon, nodding to a new set of hinges he was crafting. Thomas grunted, not looking up from the anvil. "It's iron. You hit it till it bends." "We had a smith in Cincinnati," she pressed on. He was not as skilled. His welds would break." Thomas finally paused, wiping sweat from his brow with a sooty forearm. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. He saw the intelligence in her eyes, the weariness, and the fact that she wasn't wearing the blank, beatific mask of the others. "Cincinnati, eh?" he said. "Nasty place, filthy. Why'd any sane woman trade it for this?" He gestured to the pristine, orderly, silent valley. "I sought refuge," Ilara said simply. "Refuge," Thomas scoffed, turning the iron in the fire. "Refuge or a gilded cage? I've been in prisons with more conversation. This prophet of yours, he runs a tight ship. He is guided by the Lord," Ilara said, reciting the doctrine, but her voice was flat. Thomas laughed, a short, sharp bark. "The Lord, is it? The Lord tell him to eat roast beef while you all eat gruel? The Lord tell him to bind women to his guardians?" He lowered his voice. "I'm not blind, sister, and I'm not deaf. This place, it ain't right." Ilara's heart leaped. "An ally. Be careful," she whispered, stepping closer to the heat of the forge. "The watchers, Brother Silas." "Silas," Thomas sneered, "the pale ghost. He watches me. I watch him. I've got a 2-year contract, and the prophet needs his plows. I'm safe enough. You, on the other hand, you look like you've seen a spook." I was bound to Silas," Ilara said. Thomas's hammering stopped. He turned fully to her. "You were? One of the vessels?" "I was, but I became unwell. I was declared unfit, tainted." Thomas saw the story in her eyes, the trauma, the fear, and the escape. "Unfit," he said, a slow smile spreading on his face. "Fortunate, I'd say. Better a tainted worker than a holy broodmare." The bluntness of his language, so different from the euphemisms of Havenwood, was like a splash of cold water. "I need your help," Ilara said, her voice a desperate rush. "Not for me. For the children, the consecrated." She quietly told him what she had seen: the newborn, the prophet, the stone building in the woods, the empty-eyed mothers. Thomas listened, his smile fading, replaced by a grim frown. "A building in the woods? Takes the babes soon as they're born? They say it's a school," Ilara said. "But it's guarded, and it's secret." "Nothing good happens in secret, sister," Thomas said. "What do you need from me?" "I need to get inside." "The door is locked, a heavy lock. From your forge, I'd wager." "Aye, I've made 'em." Thomas nodded. "Hardened steel. But every lock has a key. Or a tool strong enough to break it," she said. Thomas looked at her, a new respect in his eyes. "You've got iron in you, sister, but breaking it is noise. Noise brings watchers, and Silas is a light sleeper. No, a key is better. Or a copy." "Silas has the key," Ilara said. "He and the prophet. He never lets it from his sight." "Then we'll have to borrow it, or at least borrow its shape." Thomas thought for a moment, his eyes scanning the tools of his trade. "I'll need an impression. Beeswax, tallow, anything soft. Can you get close to him? Close to the key?" Ilara's stomach roiled. Get close to Silas? The man who had been her keeper, who now wouldn't even look at her. He disdains me. He sees me as a failure." "Good," Thomas said. "He won't expect it. He wears it on his belt, aye? A ring of keys?" "Yes." "Go to the evening meal. Stumble. Spill something on him. A bowl of porridge, hot broth. In the confusion, get the wax to the key. Just a second is all I need." He went to a back shelf and scraped a small, hard lump of beeswax from a block he used for coating finished iron. He pressed it into her hand. "It's a fool's plan, sister, but it's the only one we've got." Ilara hid the wax in her pocket. Her hands were shaking. She was no spy. She was a spinner, a kitchen hand. But when she thought of that wailing newborn, carried into the dark by the prophet, her resolve hardened. That night, at the silent, tense communal meal, Ilara carried 2 bowls of the thin, watery vegetable stew. Silas sat at his usual table with the other watchers, near the prophet's raised platform. Ilara walked toward them. She locked eyes with Silas. His gaze was cold, dismissive, the tainted. Ilara took a breath. She let her foot catch on the leg of the bench. She stumbled, as Thomas had said. The bowls flew from her hands. Hot stew splashed across the table directly onto Silas's lap. He leapt up with a hissed curse, a shocking breach of the hall's silence. Everyone stared. Ilara, feigning panic, rushed forward with a cleaning cloth, dabbing at his linen trousers, which were now stained. "Brother, forgive me, I am so clumsy. My fast, I am still weak." She was dabbing at his waist, near his belt. His hands were busy brushing the hot liquid off his chest. The keys were right there. Her hand, clutching the now softened wax inside the cloth, found the ring. She pressed the cloth and the wax hard against the largest, most intricate key. The key she had seen the watcher use at the stone house. "Enough, woman!" Silas roared, shoving her back. Ilara fell to the floor, her face a mask of terror and shame. The hall was in uproar. "Silence!" The prophet's voice cut through the noise. Silas froze, his face red. He looked at the prophet, then at Ilara. "Sister Ilara," the prophet said, his voice cold, "your weakness continues to be a disruption. You will have no meal for 3 days. Go. Brother Silas, control yourself. It was an accident." "Yes, prophet," Silas said, his voice tight with humiliation. He glared at Ilara with pure hatred. Ilara scrambled to her feet and fled the hall. She did not stop until she reached the darkness behind the kitchens. Her entire body was shaking, but clutched in her hand, safe inside the cloth, was a small, palm-sized lump of beeswax, and pressed perfectly into it was the exact, intricate shape of the lock's mechanism. It took Thomas 2 days to craft the key. He worked late into the night, the sounds of his hammer masked by the rhythm of the grain mill. He forged the key from a hardened steel spike, filing the teeth with meticulous secret precision. He passed it to Alara during a tool exchange, the cold, heavy metal sliding from his sooty hand into hers. It felt like a weapon. "This will open the door," he whispered, his face grim. "But what's inside, sister? Are you prepared for that? Some doors are best left locked." "I have to know," she said, hiding the key in the waistband of her skirt. "Tonight is the vesper of the new moon. The entire community will be in the tabernacle for the great chant. Even the guards change shifts. You'll have an hour, maybe less. Be swift. And Alara." He grasped her arm. "If you are not back at the smithy by the time the chant ends, I am coming for you." Alara was stunned by the fierce protectiveness in his voice. It was the first act of human, selfless kindness she had experienced in months. "Be safe, Thomas." That night, the tabernacle was lit, the low, mesmerizing chant of the vesper of the new moon rolling out across the fog-draped valley. Alara, having slipped out of the kitchens, circled wide, keeping to the shadows of the wood line. The cold air burned her lungs. Her heart hammered. She reached the clearing. The stone building was a dark, silent lump against the trees. As Thomas predicted, the watcher at the door was restless, eager to join the vesper. When his replacement arrived, they exchanged brief, muffled words, and the first watcher hurried off. The new watcher, Brother Philemon, began a slow, predictable patrol around the small building. Alara waited, her muscles cramping in the cold. She watched him circle twice. He would disappear behind the back of the building for a count of 30. She had to be fast. The moment he turned the corner, Alara darted from the trees. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely fit the key into the lock. The metal felt frozen. She turned it. The lock was well oiled. It clicked open with a soft, sickening snick. She slipped inside, pulling the heavy door shut behind her into absolute, suffocating darkness. The air was wrong. It was warm, stiflingly warm, and it carried a strange, sweet, medicinal smell, like laudanum and sour milk. She fumbled for the matches she had stolen from the kitchen. Her fingers found the sulfur tip. She struck it. The small flame flared, and Alara's hand flew to her mouth to stifle her scream. It was not a nursery. It was a laboratory. It was a long, low-ceilinged room, heated by a large, enclosed iron stove. Lining the walls, from floor to ceiling, were not cradles. They were containers. Glass containers imported from the city, like the ones Dr. Finch used for his specimens, but large. Bell jars. But they were not empty. Inside, nestled on soft cotton, were the children, the consecrated. Alara saw at least a dozen, ranging in size from the newborn she had seen the prophet carry, to a small, frail-looking child of perhaps 3. They were all asleep, unnaturally asleep. Alara crept closer, the match trembling. The air was thick with the smell of laudanum. She saw small vials and droppers next to each glass container. They were being drugged, kept in a state of constant, managed slumber. But that was not the worst of it. They were pale, terribly, unnaturally pale, and some of them, their features, were not perfect. One small infant had a hand with a 6th finger. Another's head seemed elongated. A toddler, his face peaceful in his drugged sleep, had a dark, spidery mark covering half his face. These were not the perfect vessels the prophet preached about. These were his mistakes. The sacred essence, the divine lineage. Alara whispered, the horror dawning. Prophet Jeremiah's sacred line was not pure. It was flawed, deeply, genetically flawed. He wasn't purifying the community. He was using the healthy women of the flock, the strong temples like her, to try and breed out his own hidden hereditary taints. This was not a school. This was a place to hide his failures, to keep the flawed offspring of his sacred compact, hidden, drugged, and out of sight, while he preached about his own perfection. What happened to them? Did they just sleep here until they stopped? She saw a small desk in the corner. On it was a large leather-bound ledger. The match was burning her fingers. She lit a small oil lamp on the desk. She opened the ledger. It was meticulous. It was the prophet's handwriting. It listed names. Vessel, Sister Mary. Binding, Brother Joseph. Consecration, Dec. 1st. Birth, Sept. 10th. Issue, male. Flaw, pulmonary weakness. Status, pending. Vessel, Sister Ruth. Binding, Brother Levi. Consecration, date. Birth, date. Issue, female. Flaw, cranial malformation. Status, released. Released. The same word Silas had used for Sister Ruth, the defiant mother, now used for her flawed child. Ilara felt bile rise in her throat. Released. It did not mean set free. It meant disposed of. But where? Her eyes were drawn to the large iron stove. It was not a heating stove. It was a crematorium, a small, efficient one, like those used in medical schools in the city to dispose of specimens. He wasn't just hiding them. When the flaws were too great or when they became too difficult to manage, he was releasing them. He was eliminating his own tainted offspring, his own sacred essence, to maintain the illusion of his divinity. The blood, the lineage, he was so obsessed with was a lie, a toxic, catastrophic lie. She heard a sound, a key. In the lock, Ilara blew out the lamp. She plunged the room back into darkness, her heart stopping. She scrambled behind a row of shelves, her body shaking violently. The door opened. A sliver of moonlight cut the black. Brother Silas stepped inside. He did not light a lamp. He seemed to know his way by touch. He walked toward one of the glass containers, the one holding the newborn, Sister Mary's son. He picked up the laudanum dropper. He administered a few drops to the sleeping infant. "Sleep, little shadow," he whispered. His voice, it was not the flat, cold voice of the watcher. It was paternal. It was filled with a terrible, aching sadness. He gently touched the glass. The prophet's work. It is so heavy, so much dross. To find the gold. He stood there for a long time, a dark silhouette against the moonlight. He was not just a jailer. He was the nursery's keeper, the man who managed the prophet's living, breathing, flawed secrets. He checked the stove, his hand resting on the cold iron. He sighed. Then he turned and left, locking the heavy door behind him. Ilara waited until her lungs were burning. She stumbled out from her hiding place, relit the lamp, and looked at the ledger again. She turned the page, and she saw her own name. Vessel, Ilara Bethpage. Binding, Brother Silas. Consecration, scheduled. Status, tainted, vessel compromised. Action, to be scheduled for the quiet room, cleansing or release. He was going to have her released. Her sickness had not saved her. It had only signed her warrant. The prophet could not allow a tainted vessel, one who knew she had been chosen and then rejected, to walk freely. She knew too much. She had to run, not just from the consecration. She had to run now, tonight, or she would be taken to the quiet room and released, just like the flawed children in their glass beds. Ilara fled the stone nursery, the duplicate key clutched in her hand, the horrible images burned into her mind. She did not run back to the smithy. She ran to the one place she knew she could find Hannah, the infirmary. The Vesper chant was still echoing across the valley. She burst through the door. Hannah was asleep on a small cot in the back. "Hannah, wake up!" Ilara shook her, her voice a harsh whisper. Hannah woke with a start, her eyes wide with terror. "Ilara? What? You should be—" "He's killing them," Ilara choked out, the words tumbling over each other. "The children, the consecrated, they're flawed. His essence is flawed. He's hiding them, in a stone house, drugging them. And the ones who are too flawed—" She pointed toward the forest. "There is a stove. He's releasing them." Hannah's face went sheet white. She had perhaps suspected, but the reality was worse. "And he's going to release me," Ilara said, showing her the ledger page she had ripped from the book. "I am tainted. He's sending me to the quiet room. Tonight or tomorrow. Hannah, I have to leave." "Leave? Ilara? The snow? The watchers?" "I have a key," Ilara said, holding it up. "From Thomas, the blacksmith. He helped me." "Thomas?" Hannah's mind was working quickly. "He is an outsider. He can leave. But you? You are property. He will help me, Alara insisted. I know he will. No, Hannah said, her voice suddenly firm. Fleeing is what Sister Ruth did, and Silas caught her. You cannot run from him, Alara. He will hunt you. You have to break him. Here. Now. Break him? Hannah, he is a prophet. They believe him. They will tear me apart. What did you say? Hannah grabbed her. His essence. It's flawed. The children are the proof. That is his weakness, not his power, his shame. He is a liar. You cannot expose him to us. We are trapped. You must expose him to the only person who can stop him. Who? Silas, Hannah said. Alara stared at her. Silas? Hannah, Silas is his creature. He is the one drugging the children. He called them dross. He called them dross because that is what the prophet told him they are. Hannah countered, her voice urgent. You said he sounded sad. You said he called him the prophet's work. He is a believer, Alara, a true, fervent believer. He believes he is doing the Lord's hard work, weeding the garden, protecting the sacred essence. He worships the prophet. But what if he knew, what if he believed, that the prophet himself was the source of the taint? Ilara's mind reeled. He would shatter, Hannah said. His faith is absolute, but it is placed in a lie. You must show him the lie, Alara. Not that the children are flawed, but that the prophet's bloodline is the flaw. How? How can I prove it? The ledger. You have a page. But it's not enough. You need the prophet himself. Hannah looked at Alara, her eyes bright with a desperate, dangerous idea. You said Dr. Finch supplies him, laudanum, for his visions. Yes, Alara said. He keeps it in the infirmary, in a locked chest. I have seen it. Hannah moved to a small, sturdy box. The prophet, he has a sickness, a shaking sickness. I have seen it, late at night when he thinks no one is watching. His hands, they tremble. His body goes rigid. It is a holy affliction, he calls it. The burden of the Lord's voice. But Dr. Finch, he brings him this. She produced a small key from her own pocket. She opened the chest. Inside was a large bottle of dark liquid laudanum and several other bottles. One was labeled, in the doctor's neat hand, bromide of potassium. For seizures. He is not divine, Hannah whispered. He is just a sick man. A sick man, terrified of his own diluted body. This is what his sacred essence truly is. An affliction. He's trying to breed it out, hoping for a pure child that is free of his own shadow. The Vesper. It's ending, Alara said, hearing the chant slow. Take it, Hannah said, thrusting the bottle of bromide into her hand. The laudanum, too. What? What am I to do? Silas. You must get Silas, not to the nursery, to the prophet. Tonight, the prophet will be communing after the Vesper. He will be in his house, alone. He will take his medicine. You must ensure that Silas sees him, not as a god, but as a patient, as a flawed, shaking man. How? Silas hates me. He won't follow me. He will, Alara said, a new cold resolve settling over her. He will, because I am going to tell him the prophet's life is in danger. She grabbed the bottles and ran from the infirmary. Thomas was at the smithy, his forge damped down, a heavy iron poker in his hand. Alara, you're safe. What did you find? Worse than we imagined, she said, her voice tight. It's a lie, all of it. Thomas, I need you, not to run, to fight. I need a diversion, the biggest one you can make. I need fire. Thomas looked at her, then at the bottle in her hand. Fire? The spinning house, Alara said. It's full of flax, dry wool. It will go up like a torch. It will draw everyone, the prophet, the watchers, all of them. But Silas, I will fetch Silas. You're mad, Thomas breathed. They'll have our heads. They're going to release me anyway, Alara said. This is the only chance. For me. For those children. Will you help me? Thomas looked at her, his pragmatic nature warring with the horror of what she was implying. He nodded once. "The spinning house. It will bring the valley down." "When?" "When I have Silas. Wait for my signal. When you see the light in the prophet's window, flicker 3 times, light the fire." "And what will you be doing?" "Showing the dragon his own reflection," Ilara said. She turned and ran toward the watcher's barracks, where Silas would be returning, triumphant from the Vesper.